Hello and welcome, I'm Oles Gerdjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. 6 Ukrainian servicewomen visited NATO headquarters in Brussels. Their goal was to present the film Invisible Battalion about women who fight on the front line. Among other things, the brave 6 wanted to deliver an important information about the current stage of war in eastern Ukraine to NATO's top officials. But were they granted a chance to speak out? Let's address this question to Andriana Susak, war veteran from the Aydar voluntary battalion, national hero of Ukraine. Hello and thank you for coming.
Hello.
It's a great honor for me to have you here. So first of all, what are your impressions after this visit?
After the visit of headquarters of NATO, I understood that ambassador, the veteran diplomacy is very important for Ukraine now, because we have informational war and about the war on the east of Ukraine and about the aggressor like Russian Federation can speak only veterans or other people who have been participated in battle, in combat operation and so on.
Who experienced this aggression themselves, yes. Right? So as far as I understand, this is unprecedented event in the modern history of Ukraine, when war veterans, they took this responsibility and served some diplomatic mission to the foreign, very important military body. And could you please explain the emerging of this veteran diplomacy, and do you see it being more effective than the ordinary one?
I think and I hope that it will be more effective, the diplomacy, because after 5 years of the war on the east of Ukraine, we understood that we can't want the informational war in Ukraine. And the screening of the Invisible Battalion was not only in the headquarters of NATO, but also in the Canada, in the Parliament of Canada, in the US. And after that screening, after the Canada and after the US, Maria Berlinska understood that the Western civilization hear us, hear veterans. And after the screening and after the some conversation or something like that, we try to make new projects. We try to decide new questions as for Ukraine. So the NATO headquarters and the screening of the Invisible Battalion in the headquarters was not the first, like the veteran ambassador mission, but it was like official first. So we hope that in future we will have the opportunity to visit another headquarters, and in future our veteran Katya Primak, she's going to UN headquarters in New York. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, speaking of your desire to visit more diplomatic bodies, what was the feedback from the Ukrainian governors, from the Ukrainian state officials about this visit? Would they support this idea, or will this be on your own?
The head of the mission in NATO, Vadim Pristaiko, he said that it was important that we visited the headquarters of NATO and that we have some conversation with the highest rank of NATO. But from Ukrainian government, like when we came back, I didn't hear anything.
Any feedback, any reaction?
Yeah, any feedback. I know the feedback from the NATO on that day after. They said that your girls said about the war in Ukraine, like we want to hear during these 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So they wanted to hear the information that you delivered. Well, speaking of this information and speaking of the question that I raised in my introduction to this conversation, I know each of you was preparing a speech to deliver the speech for a long time, right? You were planning on 5 minutes talk each, and then some of your comrades were facing this big challenge of knowing English language, so that's why it took them more time time to write this speech and then to learn it by heart, to memorize everything. So you were all stressed and worried how to perform in front of this important audience. Then you were required, when you already were in Brussels, you were required to shorten the speech from 5 minutes to 2 minutes. So eventually, were you granted this chance to deliver your speeches to top NATO officials?
Yes, of course. We didn't understand that such event on the NATO headquarters have the reglement. And the organizer of our mission, of our visiting, they even didn't know about the speech, about the 2 minutes, and so on and so on. That's why we were preparing, and after the fact that they said that we have just 2 minutes, and 2 questions from audience were the questions, and 2 girls from our mission have the answers. So Olena Bilozerska and Yana Zinkevich just said their speech because this speech was the answer from the audience, and we have 2 more questions about the situation in the armed forces in Ukraine, about the gender equality, and also about the
rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation. It was Yana Zinkevich question about the war. It was about the Russian Federation, the enemy. It was Olena Bilozerska question. I had a question about the gender equality in armed forces, and Daria Zubenko explained about the voluntary battalion, like radicalism or something like that.
This question about gender equality in Ukrainian military is very interesting, and this movie, Invisible Battalion, depicts this issue in our armed forces. And let's just explain the audience once again that this is a documentary about Ukrainian service women who are fighting on the Donbass, and you are also featuring in this film. And as far as I know, when the conflict started, you were registered, listed in the armed forces as a tailor, but in reality you served in a combat position in a volunteer battalion. So this is, gathering of stories like yours, right? That when women were registered as tailors, as cooks maybe, but they actually have been actively participating in defending the country, right?
Yes. The film was, the premiere was on the 2016, and before, in 2014 and 2015, we have the situation in armed forces in Ukraine that, for example, I was a seamstress or tailor by the documents, and a shock trooper, in fact, and all the girls who are the characters in the film, they were the paramedic or something like that, but they took part in combat operation. So the film was the first and maybe one of the most important power to change maybe some juridical situation in Ukraine, and about the advocacy, juridical advocacy, and about the film. Our government, they attend the law, and also there were 63 combat positions open for Ukrainian girls in armed forces, combat positions. So now Ukrainian service women have the chance to be like sniper, and so on and so on.
So Ukraine stepped on the right path. I mean, gender equality now became an important issue for us, and it's being paid attention to. This is great. I have read the article by your comrade Olena Bilozerska when I was preparing for this interview, and I noticed one thing. When Ukrainian women were watching this Invisible Battalion in Brussels the same day when it was screened at NATO headquarters, they were telling you with a great enthusiasm that they could never do this. What could you respond to these kind of questions?
To defend the country is like is like to say that we love this country or something like that. And I think that maybe we think that we can't do this. But in 2014, we didn't think at all what we are doing. Mm-hmm. We just moved to the east of Ukraine because the armed forces of Ukraine were not ready to stand against Russian armed forces and military forces. So I think that I didn't think that everyone can and everyone must go to the armed forces and must defend the country, but because the armed forces of Ukraine has to be the professional one, and but you can fight for the Ukrainian question in another sides, like yes, like when you are abroad, you can help, you can share the link, you can share the information about Ukraine in English, in the language you speak, and you can help the armed forces, like volunteer, to be volunteer, and when you are a service woman or a serviceman, you have to be a professional, like on the job you do.
This is a very powerful message. So it means that it's not only about duty, but also about will.
Yes.
Of everyone among us. I would like to know, what was the reaction from NATO's top officials on your visit? I do know that on this meeting there were 3 representatives presiding: NATO Deputy Secretary General Rose Hettemöller, Secretary General Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security Claire Hutchinson, and Chairman at Mission of Ukraine to NATO Vadim Pristaiko.
So the feedback from the heads was the following. So Claire Hutchinson said that we will be in touch because we know that there is implementation of the resolution in Ukraine 1325 as for international agreement. Vadim Pristaiko said that we will be in touch and maybe we will have new projects together, like civil society with government's position in headquarters. So we have also 2 films about the another films about the Ukrainian situation and the Ukrainian war, and the film is a very good instrument to show and then to speak. Also, after the screening, we have lunch, and during lunch we decided a lot of questions as for gender equality, as for rehabilitation, because we need rehabilitation program from NATO because we don't have in Ukraine.
Are they ready to provide this program?
Yes.
This is great news.
Yes.
So this is the achievement of
yes,
of this
and
visit.
also we have to work as for the standard. A lot of documentation or something like that is for
you
the
mean
NATO.
To make Ukrainian army more compliant with the NATO standards?
Yes, NATO standards. To be a member, or to say to the NATO that we are ready because we made all possible. We are there. We made all the question. For example, NATO said you have to do this. You have to implement this, and Ukraine not should ask, we want to be the member of NATO. We want to be, please take us to the NATO, something like that. But we have to be stronger and to say we have made all the obligations, so we are the member of NATO.
Mm-hmm. So this was the message from NATO to us, that we should be more ready and more showing our will actually to make a change, not only to ask for a change.
And not just from NATO to Ukraine, but also from civil society to Ukraine. Mm-hmm, so let's work and everything will be good.
Well, this is a good message that we have to think through, this information that you shared with us. Thank you so much for being a guest today in our studio. It was an honor and a pleasure for me, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
That was Andriana Susak, war veteran from the Aydar Voluntary Battalion, National Hero of Ukraine. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Aydar. Goodbye.